Pat, welcome to the show.
Well, thanks for having me, Dave. It's good to see you again.
Very much so. Listeners, viewers, let me tell you something about Pat. Okay. I used to work for the Score Television Network in the 2000s in Toronto, Ontario, Canada. Pat was with the Leafs, media relations role. He was always so good to me whenever I did cover the team. First class guy. So, Pat, I just want to thank you publicly for all that you did. Much appreciated.
Well, thanks for those kind words, Dave. It was a tough climate to work in, both as a reporter and as a PR person. So I'm glad that you came away with it with some good thoughts about the experience, good
Abs-
flashbacks of the experience.
Absolutely.
Appreciate the kind words, though.
Of course, no problem. So you're talking about a tough climate. Okay, so obviously everybody, the Toronto Maple Leafs, if you're not an NHL fan, it's an iconic franchise, just tons of history and tradition, and it's like the mecca of hockey in the hockey world. And Pat was in charge of all the media relations. So you can imagine what kind of requests were out there. It was kind of intense, right, Pat?
It was a fishbowl. The Leafs sell newspapers and they drive ratings on the radio and TV. So it was quite commonplace to have whatever happened at practice or in the game on the front cover of the Toronto Sun or the Toronto Star the next day. So you really had to be mindful of what was happening around you regarding the team. From a reporter's point of view, I'm sure it wasn't good enough just to go down and hold a microphone up to Wendell Clark and get sound. I mean,
Mhm.
your bosses probably wanted you to poke around, get something that's different from the rest of the herd that's down at the practice so that you could make news on your own and not just have what everybody else has. So it was a real unpredictable landscape, but wouldn't have it any other way. And, the Leafs matter to people on an everyday basis, and you can see just by the playoffs right now, it makes people feel good when they win, and they feel it when they lose. So the Maple Leafs really matter, and it was an important job in my view.
For sure. Can you backtrack here? Like, how did you get that job? That was a coveted position. How did you get there?
It was like having the Powerball ticket to a sports internship. I
Mm,
grew up in a real sports-minded family with five older siblings, three older brothers, and it was a real sports household, especially with my brothers growing up. So I was a massive sports fan. And I was fortunate enough in year two of the sports administration program at Durham College to land the internship with the Toronto Maple Leafs front office. This was the first year that the Maple Leafs opened up a position to an intern because it was such a small operation. And I was fortunate enough to land that in October of 1987. So I was ecstatic, obviously. I mean, that was the number one option of the placements that the college was offering. So I was a kid in a candy store when I got that. It was just awesome to be dropped into the Maple Leafs front office as a young 22-year-old
mm,
and went in there eyes wide open. But I also felt I had a really good knowledge of sports, especially hockey. So I could hit the ground running a little bit with having grown up in a sports climate and as a sports fan and watching Hockey Night in Canada every Saturday. So I joined the front office as a PR intern under the watch of Bob Stellick.
yep.
Gord Stellick was assistant GM at the time, and he became GM a few months later when the late Jerry McNamara passed or was released of his duties as GM. So it was just a wide-eyed experience for me.
Wow. Who were the players on the team at that time? Gary Lehman, was he on that squad or is
Yeah,
that too?
Gary Lehman. No, the best known player was Boreas Salming.
Mm,
I I was fortunate to work there for Boreas' last 2 years as a Maple Leaf. He
wow.
was the highest paid player at that time, making probably 400,000 a year.
Mhm.
You can believe that nowadays. So the team was Salming. Wendell Clark had back issues the first couple of years, but he was certainly part of the team. Vincent Damphousse, Luke Richardson's first year as an 18-year-old. Gary Lehman, Russ Courtnall, Ed Olchuk. I joined the office the week after the Leafs had just made the trade with Chicago, where they received Al Secord,
Yes.
uh, Eddie Olchuk, and the Leafs gave up Bob McGill, Steve Thomas, and Rick Vive. So I came right in after Rick Vive had left.
Oh my gosh.
But Harold Ballard was the owner. I
What was
started,
that like?
I started in '87, and he died in 1990. So
Okay.
he was mostly in a wheelchair. He was like a
Mm,
grandfatherly figure. His health was not the greatest.
right.
Um, he still was able to capture headlines in the newspapers by making outrageous comments, such
Yeah.
as Wendell Clark is pulling the lead and not playing because he has a back problem. And there was all kinds of discord with him and the media because Yolanda McMillan was living with him and making all kinds of claims and getting headlines in the newspapers. And then he eventually died in 1990.
Right. Got
But
it.
John Brophy was head coach.
Yes.
Jerry McNamara was general manager. Gord Stellick was assistant GM.
Mhm.
And then we had three full-time scouts in Maple Leaf Gardens. It was Johnny Bauer, Dick Duff, and Floyd Smith. They all shared an office at Maple Leaf Gardens. And I sat outside of their office in an open area at this big, large desk doing statistics and fan mail and community appearances for players in the summer. So it was a very, very small mom and pop operation.
My
And
goodness.
when you look at the total of full-time staff at Maple Leaf Gardens back then, it was probably 50 or so. And that
Wow.
includes box office, accounting, marketing was just a couple of people in an office. So it was very, very small, tight-knit group,
Mm.
and it was uh, it was a great time, that's for sure.
Sounds like it.
Yeah,
My goodness. So let's
yeah.
talk about the rise of Pat Park within the organization. So you're that 22-year-old kid, wide-eyed, doing the stats, the fan mail, all that sort of thing. What are the next levels within the organization you graduated to?
Well, from '87 to '97, I assisted Bob Stellick. He was the director of business operations and communications.
Mm,
Um, Bob left in '97, and then I assumed more responsibility after that. Ken Dryden had just come in. And then 2 years after that, we had the merger with the Raptors in 1998.
mm,
So it became more involved with the transition to the Raptors and the move to the Air Canada Center. But for the first 10 years or so, it was mostly as media relations um, in the early to mid 90s, I would say.
got it. All right, Pat. So let's talk about that media relations role. So day to day, what is it like? So you're talking about being in a fishbowl. What kind of mentality do you need to have as a media relations person, especially with a big franchise like the Leafs? Like, how's your day? Like when you start that day, how do you start it mentally, knowing what's about to come?
Well, mentally, you have to realize what's going on around the team. I kind of liken it to a waiter in a restaurant. You have to know what's going on in the kitchen and also what's going on the floor of the restaurant. And you're trying to make everything go as smoothly as you can. It's um, it's about building relationships with the media. If you have a better rapport with the media and the team is somewhat cohesive with the media, at least you're more likely to soften some of the criticism that comes towards the team. If you've lost six in a row, sure, the team's going to be criticized, but
Mhm.
you just want to try and do your best to make sure that you're trying to take away the benefit of the doubt, I guess. You have to know what the hot topics are. Maybe it's the power play that's gone over 15 in the last 5 games, or someone may be injured that you might have to make available to the media because you don't want the media chasing down the player in a parking lot or trying to show up at his front porch to get a comment. So
Mm,
you have to be aware of the issues that are going on around the team. You have to keep the head coach, who's your daily spokesperson, abreast of everything that's going on. I think even nowadays, but going back towards those days, the coach has a pretty good idea of what's going to be asked of him. And that's from the PR director briefly meeting with that coach before he goes in front of the cameras just to say, hey, these are the hot issue buttons today. You're going to get asked about such and such. Just you never want to see your spokesperson, mostly the main coach, the head coach, being blindsided and not having an answer or being upset that the subject was even broached. So you always have to keep the coach and the general manager in the loop as to what the issues are. Back in those days, if Steve Simmons or Bob McKenzie were there at a practice, you basically had a pretty good idea of what was going to be in the newspaper the next day at
Mm.
6 in the morning when you pick up that newspaper because they were asking the questions and getting follow-up quotes from there. But it's totally different now. Everything's instantaneous. The lines of practices are being tweeted out on X, and everything is just so fluid nowadays. But back in the 90s, you had a pretty good idea of what was coming down the pike the next morning when you had your coffee and newspaper. So it's really changed. But a good PR person puts in a lot of hours
Mm.
and has to be good at building relationships and has to have some pretty good in instincts, I think.
Absolutely. Okay, so needing to build rapport with reporters, you got to
Yep.
be in the know of what's happening around you. Read the newspapers, watch TV, listen to the radio back then. But nowadays, yes, you're right. It's like you're watching social media, TikTok, all that sort of thing. It's such a drastic change. I remember newspapers, Pat. I remember
Yeah.
sports pages. You
PR
know.
people will say that the internet took away all the fun from the job
All
because
right.
everything's
Really.
online now and everybody's got an opinion and it's so very much unpredictable and it will and anything that comes out can really change the direction of your day if it's something you're not expecting.
Right. So it was probably easier to control the narrative back then than
Yeah,
now, right?
yeah, I would say so. The numbers were probably a lot larger in the late 90s and early 2000s for the number of reporters
Mm,
because you had four daily newspapers in the GTA when you have the Globe and Mail, the Star, the Sun, Hamilton Spectator
yeah.
was a regular reporter at practice. And then you had all the affiliate TV stations, the local CBC, City TV, Leafs TV came on board. So it was no surprise to have 40 reporters at practice covering the team on a Tuesday morning. But nowadays, a lot of it is company owned between Rogers and Bell. And
Yeah.
unfortunately, some of the newspapers don't staff as many reporters and columnists, and they don't travel as many people.
Yeah.
So I think number wise, I think it's decreased, but certainly a large volume back in that day.
Right. Imagine, Pat, you were starting out today and having to deal with this kind of landscape, the social media, all that sort of thing. How would you do your job differently, in retrospect to what you did back then?
Well, I think a lot of today's players are used to it. They've
Right.
they've grown up in a social media age. They're used to having a phone on them and posting their own videos and building their own brand nowadays.
Yeah.
So they're used to cameras in the dressing room. They're used to that 24/7 HBO, Hard Knocks
Yeah.
narratives that you see. I think they welcome that. I think they can build their own brand that way and not leave it up to a columnist to paint the picture that they may not particularly like in the end. But so they're more welcoming to being themselves and
Mm.
lifting the curtain, I guess, on team operations on a day-to-day basis. So I think it would be very much different if I were to step into that role nowadays. I mean, I could hardly get a stationary GoPro camera at the dressing room door just to show them, doing the stick taps before they come out of the dressing room. I mean, there's a lot of old school hockey people that they weren't ready for that, but
Mm.
now it's just part of the daily business. You see the leak blueprint
Mm.
uh, vignettes quite commonly now of behind the scenes footage. open gym with the Raptors. That's
Yep.
really taken off in the last 10 or 12 years. So it's very much a different climate, I would say.
Right. As a viewer, are you a fan of like the open gyms, like just that kind of access?
I am, but it's kind of the luster's worn off a little bit. I
Hmm,
think it's not as novel as it was 10 or 12 years ago.
got it.
I enjoy watching Hard Knocks on the NFL
Sure.
uh, landscape because that's something I'm not privy to, obviously. But I think if you're a fan nowadays, it's great. You get to see, the dressing room celebrations or milestones being recognized and the passing of a belt after a game when the guy scores an overtime goal or the goalie makes 45 saves. So
Hmm.
it's great for fans, that's for sure.
For sure.
But as a PR person, I always wonder, oh, is this a good shot? Is someone in this line of sight that shouldn't be in the video, or is someone cursing, or is this inappropriate? But I guess people are more um, accommodating that way, and it's part of today's media world.
Sure. It can get mentally exhausting. Like I can only imagine back in the day, just being aware of every little thing to make sure it doesn't paint like a negative story about the squad. You have to be right? The whole time.
Yeah, yeah, no doubt about it. It's a 6 or 7 day a week job during the hockey season.
Mm,
And then it carries over into the summer with free agent frenzy, the draft. So
mm,
there's very few days where you can really shut off your phone. But
right.
it's yeah, no doubt about it. In hockey in Canada is number one, and
Yeah.
there's a certain pulse to it 12 months a year.
I think that's a very important point you made there, Pat. This is an all-in kind of position. Like, guys, if you're thinking about media relations with a sports team, you have to be committed,
Yeah.
invested, especially if it's a popular one. Your phone's on all the
Right.
time.
Yeah, that was one of the struggles. I would be at work, 12-hour days and game nights 3 or 4 nights a week, and you would get a feeling like, oh, I should be at home. It's Halloween or it's my son's ninth birthday. And then when you'd be at home, you'd be like, I should be down at the office. There's stuff happening. There's a game tomorrow, or there's a road trip to get ready tomorrow morning. So it is a very tough role to escape. You have to have a very
Mm,
accommodating spouse that sees that you're doing something you're passionate about. And yeah, definitely because it's the entertainment business, you have to work while people are being entertained, whether that's Boxing Day game or a New Year's Day game. It's part of being in that industry, and it's an entertainment industry. So I'm not going to lie, when I left, it did help with my work-life balance and getting
mm,
to enjoy some of the finer family time in my life. So you have to be really committed at that job. Because it can wear on you. But
mm.
one thing I liked about it, it was pretty goal driven. You could see tangible results when the team's doing well or a player's succeeding, or so you kind of rode the waves when the team was doing well, and you kind of drowned in the sorrows when you lose a 4-1 lead in game seven at the Boston Garden in 2013. So
Oh God.
it's an emotional roller
Ah,
coaster.
right.
And you got to kind of keep your wits about you because players want to be around positive people. They don't want you coming in and
Mm,
dragging down the mood if you have to get them to do something
right.
or get the group to do something as a whole. So you had to try and keep a even keel and present a positive
Right.
image and demeanor. But sometimes I thought I could have done a better job at that. But you do ride the wave of success and failure in that role.
Right, right. Were there any moments during your tenure there, like moments on the ice that really lifted you up? Like, was there like a big win, big like a night for a guy that you were elevated, you felt great, way to go. Like, were you really pumped?
Yeah. Yeah, it was hard not to. The one that really stands out is Game 6 in 1993 at the LA Forum. We were one win away from the Stanley Cup final against the Montreal Canadiens, who were waiting for us.
Hmm.
And game six was the famous Gretzky high stick, and he scored in overtime to force a game seven, which we lost. But
Yeah.
the press box at the LA Forum, a very famous arena in LA, is located right in the seats. It's like sitting 35 rows up with countertops in front of you. And I was fortunate during that game, as a lot of games, I was sitting beside Daryl Sittler, who was on the road trip on one side, and Bill Waters, our assistant GM, on my other side. And Wendell Clark came off the bench and scored with the sixth attacker with a blistering shot to tie the game. It was his third goal. And I remember the three of us collectively just stood up in our seats. And I remember slugging Daryl right on the bicep because he was so close because we had just tied the game and high fives were going on with Bill Waters. And it was just so exciting because we were so close to
Mm.
getting to the Stanley Cup final. And we all know how that ended, but that was just one in-game moment where it was just,
Yeah.
what the heck is going on? I just punched Daryl Sittler in the arm about as hard as I could out of excitement. So that's one that sticks out.
Viewers, listeners, if you're not familiar with Daryl Sittler, he is a Leafs icon that Pat Park slugged.
Yeah, on the arm. Yeah, out of excitement. He probably turned and slugged me as well because he was so excited. But it was just such a tense moment. And Wendell delivered with just a howitzer off the bench
Oh.
to tie the game. It's a great moment in Leaf history. Most Leaf fans remember the goal. Doug Gilmour from behind the net threw it out front, and Wendell just walked into it.
Absolutely. I remember that for sure. Great moment. So you're talking about being in LA with the guys. Talk about traveling as a media relations guy, just traveling with the team. What is the difference? The difference, obviously, you're away from home. Like any additional duties?
A lot of it is the same during practice and games. The role of the PR person was such that um, you'd have to get to the airport about 30 minutes before the team because I would have to get all 30 odd boarding passes. In those days, we flew commercial. We didn't
Mm,
have charters until about 1995.
wow.
So you could be sitting in a middle seat if you're Joe Public and be seated beside Boreas Solming or Mike Foligno or Luke Richardson,
Wow.
just the way it was flying commercial. Um, and that was always a stressful time, just getting to the airport, making sure that you had everything arranged. So when the team arrived, you'd have to give out like middle seats to, say, a first or second year player. And you'd ask Doug Gilmour, you want a window or an aisle? Because it's going to
I
be a
love it.
going to be a 4 hour flight, you know. So you had to give the vets whatever they wanted as far as their seats. You had to make sure that the rooming list was set to go and the keys were ready when the team arrived at the hotel at 1 in the morning,
Right.
so that no one's waiting around to wait to get their key to get to bed at night. So there was a lot of those travel duties that they were arranged ahead of time by Mary Speck in our office for
Okay.
years. And as the traveling person, that person would have to just ensure that everything's going according to plan. You had to phone the bus company to double check that they were going to be at the terminal at whatever time we were supposed to get there. Heaven forbid, if the bus wasn't there, you'd have to run to a payphone because this was before cell phones, and you'd have to phone the bus company from a payphone the odd time. So yeah, cell phones didn't come in until I don't mid 90s, late 90s. So you're kind of at the mercy of all these plans coming together ahead of time when you actually got out on the road.
You don't realize, Pat, like all these administrative things you got to do.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, I didn't realize that was part of the gig on the road.
Yeah. You'd have to hand out the per diem envelopes on the airplane.
Wait, you handed Wendell Clark a per diem?
Yeah, if we had 30 in our traveling party, I'd have 30 small white envelopes filled with cash. They got a certain rate per day on the road. So, yeah, I'd have in my bag 30 per diem envelopes. And you'd want to get rid of them as soon as possible. As soon as they were seated, you'd want to get these out of your responsibility. So to have to go down the aisle, here's your envelope, envelope, envelope. And then the guys, if they're seated together later on charters, they would a lot of times use that per diem money for their card games on the flights.
Okay, so the so the per diem amounts, was it based on the contract of each person? Because everyone's paid
No,
differently. Okay.
no, they all get the same. It's based on
Okay.
it was like $90 a day. So
Wow.
if you're going away for 3 days, it'd be 270 bucks cash
Right.
times 30 separate envelopes. So you would be handling money on the road. Uh, and I'd always be double checking. Are those envelopes in my bag? Was my bag opened? Did one drop in my car seat when I was driving to the airport? So yeah, per diem was another thing that we had to take
Wow.
care of as well.
Oh,
U.S. money, of course. And
yes.
so yeah,
So talk about, okay, on the road, guys like to, go to establishments at night. They go to the clubs. Was it your responsibility to be there, like to be on them, to get guys get back, to the hotel, like, or was that the
no,
coach?
no, that was never part of my duties.
Okay.
The coach may have said sometimes, "Hey, there's a curfew at 11 o'clock. I'll be checking doors," but
Okay.
that rarely happened. I think that was back in the 60s and 70s.
Oh, okay.
So that it was kind of understood that you
Yeah.
need to be back at the hotel at a decent hour. But no, once those were off hours for players, so I had nothing to do with that.
Got it. Okay.
Yeah,
So the travel, like, how many times would you travel during a season? You guys have 80 games, right, total?
yeah,
So I guess half, okay, so yeah, half of those. So 40 times during a season, you're on the road.
yeah. 40 games. Sometimes it'd be a 3 or 4 or 5 game road trip, and sometimes it'd be a single game trip. Bob Stellick and I would split the travel mostly
Oh, okay.
my early days. I started traveling, I think, in 1990. I
Mm,
was very young when I look back on it, but um, yeah, we'd split it probably halfway
okay.
and then gradually assumed more of that later on. But it was pretty wild to go on a road trip and go to Boston or Chicago stadiums, these places that you just watch hockey as a youngster on TV. And yeah, it was quite a kick to go to all these cities, LA, Chicago, Boston, Florida when they came into the league.
Yeah.
But yeah, I always loved seeing the old original six buildings. The Chicago
Chicago.
Stadium anthem was just off the charts good. The
In
press
Chicago?
box, yeah, the old Chicago Stadium, the press
Yeah.
box hung behind one of the nets on the end mezzanine, and literally the hair on the back of your neck would stand up during the anthem. It was just so raucous. And
God,
as a young guy, yeah, it was quite amazing to get those experiences. I was really grateful to have those opportunities.
for sure. So, what do you miss the most about that gig?
I don't miss the grind, but
Mm,
I always found great gratification when you could uh, help a youngster or a family. Like
yeah.
if, and we get lots of letters and requests, and if you could bring a youngster down to meet Matt Sundin or Wendell Clark or Doug Gilmore, I really miss those opportunities.
For sure. Making a difference. I love it.
Yeah, for sure.
So, Pat, if a kid's starting out today, media relations wants to, work with a sports team, media relations, any education, do you think they should go to college, university? Is that a good foundation to start?
It's a good foundation. would be advantageous to volunteer, whether it's your local hockey team, whether it's a junior B team in your small town, or just make make yourself versatile. Jump right into it and show that you can do sales, or you can do PR, or you can do broadcasting. It's
Mhm.
probably going to have to be time spent volunteering,
Yeah.
just to get a foot in the door and then taking it from there.
Mhm.
I'm not really up to date on what colleges and universities offer sports administration nowadays. I would guess there's more now than in the 80s, but I hear great things about this sport management course at Brock University. I hear that's very popular.
Right.
Um, but just get your foot in the door and show that you're hardworking and that you're versatile, and that does you could impress your boss that hires you on, but then you could be impressing another colleague of at a higher level in another organization, where they say, hey, this person does a great job. Maybe we should move him or her into that position on my staff, and we'll give that opportunity to that youngster to take it and run with it. So, and you always get one chance to make a good first impression. So get in
Absolutely.
the door and make the most of it and put in the hours, if it's hockey or any other sport that you're looking to work in.
For sure. Pat, listen, this has been great catching up and just you sharing your wisdom here about media relations. I really appreciate your time. Thanks for doing this.
Oh, I really appreciate it. I enjoyed looking back, and it's good to see you again.
All right, that's my chat with Pat. It was really good to see him. It had been so long, like the 2000s, since I saw Pat last, and he was really nice to me back in the day when I was covering the Maple Leafs. And it was great for him to be on the show to share his insight on the behind the scenes aspect of the media relations game with an NHL franchise and what skills you need to get that kind of gig. So, Pat, much appreciated. All right, that's it for this interview. Please feel free to subscribe to my YouTube channel and podcast for more great content. Until next time, take care and have a good one.